The Middle East is at war. Air raid sirens are sounding once again over the skies of Tel Aviv as Iran launches another wave of ballistic missile strikes against Israel. This is now the fourth night of what Israeli officials are calling Operation Roaring Lion. And tonight, the stakes could not be higher, the dangers could not be more real, and the world is watching. For the next 40 minutes, I am going to walk you through every dimension of this story. The missiles flying over Tel Aviv, the drone strikes on American soil in Dubai and Riyadh, the debates erupting in Washington, the Americans being evacuated from a region on fire, the nuclear program at the center of it all, and the question every analyst, every general, and every diplomat is quietly asking tonight. What happens next? Let us begin. Throughout this day, missiles soared through the skies of Israel. Most of them were intercepted by Israel's missile defense network, the Iron Dome, the David's Sling, and the long-range Arrow 3 system, working in concert to protect millions of people below. But not every missile was stopped. Pieces of one Iranian ballistic missile came crashing down just outside Tel Aviv, a stark reminder that no defense is perfect, that every intercept is a calculated risk, and that the people of this city are living beneath a sky that is no longer simply sky. Israeli officials confirmed tonight that the Iranian regime launched ballistic missiles directly at Tel Aviv, Israel's second-largest city. One of those missiles carried something particularly alarming on top: a cluster munition. A weapon designed not to destroy a single structure, but to scatter dozens of explosive submunitions across a wide area, making it one of the most indiscriminate and devastating devices in any military arsenal. That weapon caused significant damage to the community of Bnei Brak, a dense residential neighborhood, families, homes, streets that were ordinary yesterday. In Iran, even as those missiles were being launched, funerals were being held today for school children reportedly killed in the opening rounds of United States and Israeli strikes. Whatever your position on this war, that image demands a moment of acknowledgement. And yet, Israel is striking back, hard. Today, the Israeli Air Force targeted a Supreme Council building deep inside Iran, the very place where senior Islamic clerics had gathered to tally votes for who would succeed Ayatollah Khamenei as Iran's next supreme leader. That process, the selection of the most powerful figure in the Islamic Republic, has now been violently disrupted by an Israeli airstrike. This was not a random target. The Assembly of Experts, the body of clerics with constitutional authority to appoint and remove Iran's supreme leader, was meeting in the city of Qom, located south of Tehran. And the message sent by hitting that building was unmistakable. Israel is not just degrading Iran's military, it is targeting the political succession of the regime itself. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed the nation on this, and I quote his words directly: "We will continue to do what is necessary for our defense. We are roaring, and we are operating." Iran's foreign minister also spoke publicly today. His words were defiant. In his words, "We are also dealing with Americans who are attacking us day and night, by every means, and with the Israelis, of course." Notably, the foreign minister made no mention of the Gulf countries in those remarks, even as Iran continues to attack them. For now, those countries remain on defense. And from Qatar tonight, a significant piece of breaking intelligence. Authorities in Doha have announced the arrest of 2 cells of IRGC members, Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, who had been operating covertly inside the country. To understand the true scale of this conflict, we need to look at the geography, because what is happening is not contained to one country, or one border, or one city. Over the past 12 hours alone, Israeli and United States forces have conducted 60 separate strikes across Iran. 60, targeting missiles, launch infrastructure, command and control facilities, and elements of what officials are calling the Iranian, and I quote, terror apparatus throughout the country. Let me take you around the map, region by region. Starting in Israel, the cities of Tel Aviv and Bnei Brak have absorbed direct hits. The country is in a state of alert. Residents are sheltering in place. Defense systems are running continuously. This is a nation under siege, and it has been for 4 days. Moving to the Persian Gulf, Iran's navy, 11 ships strong, has been entirely destroyed. All 11 vessels are now decommissioned and out of service. Earlier today, U.S. Central Command, known as CENTCOM, confirmed the sinking of an Iranian frigate in the Persian Gulf. When the most powerful naval force in the region dismantles another navy completely in a matter of days, you understand the asymmetry of this conflict. The USS Abraham Lincoln, a United States aircraft carrier, is currently positioned in the Gulf of Oman east of the Strait of Hormuz, serving as the primary air operations platform for U.S. strikes. The strait itself, through which roughly 20% of the world's oil passes every day, remains open. Keeping it that way is a stated American military objective. Now, to the Gulf states, the countries that many observers assumed would stay on the sidelines. They are not on the sidelines. Bahrain, struck by Iranian retaliatory attacks. The Crown Plaza Hotel, a civilian target, was hit. Qatar, residential towers targeted. 2 IRGC cells arrested within its borders. Kuwait, the United States Embassy has been closed. The Kuwait International Airport has been struck. Saudi Arabia, the United States Embassy in Riyadh was hit overnight by at least 2 Iranian drones. The compound had been evacuated. No casualties. Iraq, the Erbil International Airport was struck. German military barracks in that region were in the impact zone, drawing European forces into this conflict's orbit whether they wanted to be or not. Dubai, and this is breaking news I will give you more detail on shortly. An Iranian drone has struck the area of the U.S. consulate in Dubai's Old City. Black smoke is rising above the city. Satellite imagery is capturing it. All U.S. personnel are accounted for. Abu Dhabi, also under drone threat at this hour. More than 10 countries are under Iranian attack simultaneously. 10. That number alone tells you that what we are witnessing is not a bilateral conflict between two nations. It is a regional war, being fought on multiple fronts across thousands of miles, involving the most powerful military in the history of the world and one of the most resilient adversaries in the modern Middle East. The weapons, what is being used and why it matters. Let me walk you through the weapons picture, because understanding the hardware is essential to understanding the stakes. CENTCOM has released newly declassified video of B-1 Lancer bombers targeting Iranian missile capabilities. The B-1, known to those who fly it as the Bone, is one of 3 strategic bombers in the United States arsenal. A supersonic, variable sweep-wing aircraft capable of carrying a payload of 75,000 pounds. It carries joint direct attack munitions, precision-guided bombs, as well as long-range cruise missiles and laser-targeted weapons. It is designed for exactly the kind of sustained, high-tempo campaign now being conducted against Iran's infrastructure. These bombers are operating alongside Israeli F-35 and F-15 strike packages. 2 air forces, 2 of the most advanced in the world, acting in concert. Now, Iran's remaining missile inventory, because this is arguably the most important number in this entire conflict. Current U.S. intelligence estimates, approximately 186 very short-range missiles, under 100 miles range, approximately 1,864 medium-range missiles, capable of striking targets several hundred miles away, roughly 25 each of long-range and intercontinental range-capable systems. That arsenal, according to Senate Intelligence Committee Chair Tom Cotton, far exceeds the combined missile defenses of the United States, our Arab friends, and Israel combined. And it grows worse, Cotton stated plainly, every single month. That is why the pace of these offensive strikes is so critical. Every launcher destroyed on Iranian soil is a missile that will never fly toward Tel Aviv, toward Riyadh, toward Dubai, or toward American forces stationed throughout the region. But there is a serious cost problem that defense analysts are watching closely, and I want you to understand it clearly. Iran has been deploying Shahed series drones, unmanned aerial vehicles originally developed in Iran and sold to Russia for use in Ukraine. These drones cost approximately $20,000 each to manufacture. The interceptors used to shoot them down, Patriot missiles, THAAD interceptors, Arrow 3, cost between hundreds of thousands and over $3 million each. That math does not add up. At the current pace of drone attacks, the interceptor stockpiles of the United States and its allies could be depleted within a week. Military planners know this, and it is why offensive operations to eliminate launch sites are not a choice. They are a necessity. Retired U.S. Air Force Brigadier General Rob Spaulding, a former B-2 stealth bomber pilot, said today, and I quote, "What we can see now is the Iranian regime is in its death throes. It's like the last spasm of fireworks. They're going to try to inflict as much damage as possible. They hit the AWS data center. They're trying to get whoever they can to bring pressure on Israel and the U.S. to stop." General Spaulding also identified the single hardest target in this campaign. In his words, "Anytime you wargame against mobile ballistic missiles, it is literally the hardest thing to kill. If you remember the Scud hunt during the first Iraq War, they're just really easy to hide, move, and shoot. So the things you have to do is focus on command and control, erasing the regime's ability to control those forces. And hopefully, over time, you put enough pressure that these guys stop doing what they're doing." Iranian drone strikes U.S. consulate in Dubai. And I want to pause here and give you the full picture of the Dubai consulate strike, because this is one of the most significant developments of the day. Reports confirmed by multiple sources indicate that an Iranian drone struck the United States consulate in Dubai, specifically impacting the parking lot adjacent to the Chancellery building and setting off a fire in that area. All U.S. personnel are accounted for. The building and many surrounding structures had been at least partially evacuated in advance. The drone itself, based on multiple videos circulating online, appears to be from the Iranian Shahed series. Anyone who has followed the war in Ukraine would recognize it. It flies low, very low, and the sound, witnesses consistently describe it the same way, as a loud lawnmower buzzing through the sky, and then an explosion. For those who know Dubai, who have walked through its old city, its historic waterways, the trading districts that line the creek, the significance of this location cannot be overstated. The British consulate is also in that area. This is one of the most prestigious, historically significant parts of a very modern city, and it has never experienced anything like this. The plumes of black smoke rising from Dubai and Abu Dhabi are now large enough to be captured on satellite imagery, visible from space. That is not a metaphor. That is the literal reality of what is happening to one of the most advanced cities on Earth right now. This is the second direct Iranian attack on a U.S. diplomatic facility in the Gulf within 24 hours. The first, overnight in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, where 2 Iranian drones struck the U.S. Embassy compound, also evacuated. Also, no casualties. The United States Embassy in Riyadh is a substantial facility, a compound with a swimming pool, tennis courts, extensive grounds. When Iranian drones begin circling over that kind of compound, the message to the Arab world and to Washington is unmistakable. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, press conference. Secretary of State Marco Rubio held a press conference today that was at times tense, at times combative, but contained some of the most important statements made by any U.S. official since this operation began. Let me walk you through the key moments. Secretary Rubio opened by confirming the evacuation figures. 9,000 Americans have successfully departed the Middle East since the start of the conflict. Approximately 15 to 16,000 have registered requesting assistance. He then delivered what I believe will be one of the defining statements of this conflict. In his words, "I'm not going to give away the details of our tactical efforts, but the hardest hits are yet to come from the U.S. military. The next phase will be even more punishing on Iran than it is right now. We have objectives. We will do this as long as it takes to achieve those objectives, and we will achieve those objectives. The world will be a safer place when we're done with this operation." The secretary then laid out the 3 core military objectives of the campaign with unusual clarity. Objective 1. Destroy Iran's ballistic missiles and their launch infrastructure. Objective 2. Destroy Iran's capability to manufacture new missiles and launchers. Objective 3. Destroy Iran's navy. And on the nuclear dimension, Secretary Rubio's words were direct and unambiguous. I quote, This terrorist, radical, cleric-led regime cannot ever be allowed to have nuclear weapons. We saw what they were willing to do to their own people. They were willing to slaughter their own people in the streets. Imagine what they would do to us. Imagine what they would do to others. Under President Trump, that will never, ever happen. On the War Powers Act, Rubio acknowledged the constitutional tension directly. We've complied with the War Powers Act, even though we believe it's unconstitutional, as has every other administration. Every other president has found the War Powers Act to be unconstitutional. Nonetheless, we notified the Gang of Eight, which is the appropriate mechanism. We sent notification within 48 hours as the law requires. We've over-complied with the law and what it requires. The press conference grew heated when reporters pressed Secretary Rubio on whether Israel drove the timing of this operation. His response was firm. In his words, "The United States made a decision. This is intolerable. Iran cannot have these missiles, cannot have these drones, cannot threaten the world." The president said, "This is the weakest they've ever been. If we don't hit them now, a year from now, a year and a half from now, no one will be able to touch them, and they'll be able to do whatever they want." He made a decision to go first, because he was not going to run the risk that they could attack us before we could hit them. He closed with these words, and they are worth sitting with. "You're about to see, we're going to unleash everything on these people in the next few hours and days. You're going to really begin to perceive a change in the scope and in the intensity of these attacks, as frankly the two most powerful air forces in the world take apart this terrorist regime and take away its ability to threaten its neighbors or hide behind a zone of immunity that allows them to develop their nuclear ambitions." Political battle in Washington. Back in Washington, this war has become a political earthquake, and I want to give you both sides of this debate fairly and completely. The United States Senate is preparing to vote on a bipartisan war powers resolution. Members of Congress who are sponsoring it argue clearly the president cannot send U.S. forces to fight a war in Iran without congressional approval. That is the constitutional position they are taking. Democratic Senator Mark Warner, Senator Richard Blumenthal, and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer emerged from a classified Gang of Eight intelligence briefing with pointed and public criticism. Their position? There was no imminent threat, no immediate danger to the United States that required this action at this moment. Democrat Ruben Gallego of Arizona went further, suggesting that Prime Minister Netanyahu was controlling American foreign policy. His words, and I quote them directly, "Netanyahu was leading Trump around by a nose ring. We're like the puppy on the leash, and Netanyahu yanks the leash, and we have to act." President Trump responded to that framing, directly and characteristically. His words, "No, I might have forced their hand. You see, we were having negotiations with these lunatics, and it was my opinion that they were going to attack first. I didn't want that to happen, so if anything, I might have forced Israel's hand. But Israel was ready, and we were ready." Senate Intelligence Committee Chair Tom Cotton, who was in the classified briefing, offered a sharply different verdict from his Democratic colleagues. Senator Cotton said, and I quote, "The simple reality is, Iran has a vast missile arsenal that far exceeds the combined missile defenses of the United States, our Arab friends, and Israel. And it gets much worse every single month. That is an unacceptable risk for the United States. It's an existential risk for our Arab friends and Israel, and it wouldn't get better if we waited for 6 or 12 or 18 months to find a more imminent risk. In fact, Iran has posed an imminent risk to the United States for 47 years, as they've maimed and killed thousands of Americans." Senator Cotton also dismissed the Democratic critique of the decision directly. His words, "I can't get inside any of my Democratic colleagues' heads. I just disagree with their view here. It's in keeping with the Democratic Party's view of Iran going back decades. Look at Barack Obama's terrible nuclear deal. That didn't block Iran's path to a nuclear weapon. It paved Iran's path to a nuclear weapon." On the coalition picture, Cotton made a point that cuts through much of the political noise. When Gulf Arab states were hit by Iran, they did not ask Trump to stop the strikes. I quote, "They didn't plead for peace. They didn't ask Donald Trump to stop. They asked Donald Trump for targeting information so they could join in the strikes on Iran. That's what a real coalition looks like. Israel's ambassador to the United Nations. Danny Denon, Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, spoke extensively today. His message was clear, urgent, and at moments deeply historical. He opened with a warning that this operation is far from over. In his words, "We are not done yet. It is going to be a long operation, but it is moving in the right direction. We are degrading the capabilities of Iran, so they will not be able to launch missiles like they do now at Tel Aviv, at Jerusalem, at Dubai, at Abu Dhabi. More than 10 countries are being attacked as we speak. It will take a few more days, but we are starting to see the results." Ambassador Danon described the next stage of the operation in these terms. "We are getting ready to move to the next stage, where we are actually going to target more regime targets, more regime assets on the ground. And hopefully the time will come for the Iranian people to take their future into their own hands." On the Netanyahu controls Trump narrative, Ambassador Danon was dismissive and direct. "They know President Trump. No one can tell President Trump what to do or drag him anywhere. President Trump is a serious, strong leader, and he was actually the leader who decided to pull out from the JCPOA that President Obama signed. It is not new, it is consistent." And then, the ambassador delivered what I think is the most powerful statement of this entire day, words that carry the full weight of history. I quote, "We actually believe the Iranians when they say, 'Death to America.' We believe them when they say, 'Death to Israel.' We believe them, and they have ballistic missiles. They are very close to achieving nuclear warheads. So what? Were those leaders expecting us to sit down and wait for them to assemble the warheads onto ballistic missiles? That would be too late. We have seen in history what happens when you try to appease regimes that threaten the entire world. You cannot wait for the moment of no return." Iran's nuclear program, the core issue. Everything you have heard tonight, every missile fired, every drone strike, every diplomatic confrontation, every political argument in Washington, traces back to one central issue: Iran's nuclear program. There is what we know. Despite Iran's public insistence that its nuclear program was peaceful, U.S. and Israeli intelligence tell a fundamentally different story. Iran has accumulated enough highly enriched uranium to construct approximately 11 nuclear weapons. That material is largely located inside the Fordow mountain complex, a deeply hardened underground facility carved into rock south of the city of Qom. A secondary enrichment site is believed to be located near Esfahan. These are not surface facilities. They were built to survive strikes. They were built to be, in Netanyahu's own word, immune. Prime Minister Netanyahu explained the urgency of timing in an interview last evening. His words, "After we hit their nuclear sites and their ballistic missile program, you think they learned a lesson? They didn't, because they are unperformable. They started building new sites, new underground bunkers. That would make their ballistic missile program and their atomic bomb program immune within months. If no action was taken now, no action could be taken in the future. And then they could target America." Secretary Rubio was equally stark when asked directly about the threat. In his words, "Iran is run by lunatics, religious fanatic lunatics. They have an ambition to have nuclear weapons. They intend to develop those nuclear weapons behind a program of missiles and drones and terrorism, behind a zone where the world will not be able to touch them for fear of those things. And this is the weakest they have ever been. Now is the time." The window, according to every senior American and Israeli official who spoke today, was closing. The bunkers were getting deeper. The missiles were getting more numerous. The enrichment was getting closer to weapons grade. Netanyahu said one thing more on this, and I think it is important. "The reason that we had to act now is because, after we hit their nuclear sites and their ballistic missile program, they didn't learn a lesson. They started building new sites, new underground bunkers. If no action was taken now, no action could be taken in the future. And then they could target America." Admiral Harward, The View from CENTCOM. Admiral Robert Harward, former deputy commander of U.S. Central Command, who led operations in both Iraq and Afghanistan, who served as a Navy SEAL with combat experience across the Middle East, and a man who grew up in Iran and attended school in Tehran, offered his assessment today. And I want to start with what he said about his mindset, because it cuts through the noise of debate and gets to the operational reality. In his words, "Look, that's all in the rearview mirror. We've made the decision. We're executing. What's important now is, as Secretary Rubio said, the missiles, the missiles, the missiles. If that stops, all of this stops. If they cannot strike a consulate, if they cannot strike an airfield, if they cannot strike anything, they are neutered." The admiral identified the number one priority clearly: destroy what remains of Iran's mobile missile inventory. His words, "This next big wave, I'm sure, is going to try to just annihilate and deplete what remains of their missile inventory. I would add, it would be helpful if we could get an indicator of where we are on the scope. Are we 50% there? 80%? I think that would calm some people down. But again, their messaging has been a brilliant act of deception." On the interceptor depletion concern, Admiral Harward was candid and direct. That's why this air campaign against finding these mobile ballistic missiles is so important, to keep pressure on them and to prevent us from running out of munitions on the defense side. It is important to get them while they're still on the G. What comes next? The question no one can answer. We are approaching the close of this broadcast, and I want to spend these final minutes on the most important and most uncertain question of all. What happens next? Secretary Rubio promised that the most intense phase of this operation is still ahead. In his words, the next wave will be even more punishing. CENTCOM confirms the operation is on or ahead of schedule. Israeli Ambassador Danny Danon says the goal is to degrade Iran's military capability to the point where it cannot launch at Israel, at the Gulf states, at American facilities. He says Israel is preparing to move to a next stage, targeting more regime assets, more political infrastructure. Dan Senor laid out the two post-war scenarios American planners are weighing: the Venezuela model, where a degraded regime continues to exist as a diminished shadow of itself, or something more fundamental, a regime that simply cannot hold itself together under the weight of external military pressure and internal popular anger. Neither outcome is guaranteed, neither is without cost. And the honest answer to the question of what Iran looks like on the other side of this is that nobody knows. What is clear, tonight, is this: Iran's navy is gone. Iran's air defense network has been severely degraded. Iran's nuclear sites have been struck. Iran's proxy network is fracturing. The Gulf states, historically fractured and cautious, are now coordinating with Israel and the United States. And the most powerful military in human history is now operating at full tempo against a regime it has designated as the foremost state sponsor of terror on Earth. Whether that leads to peace or to something longer, something harder, something more complicated, we do not yet know. What we know is that the world changed this week, and that the reverberations of what is happening in the skies over Tel Aviv and Dubai and the Persian Gulf tonight will be felt for years, possibly for generations. History is not made in clean chapters. It is not made in orderly sequences with tidy conclusions. It is made in moments like this, in moments of sirens in the night, of families sheltering in Tel Aviv, of children being buried in Tehran, of diplomats evacuating embassies in Dubai, of generals staring at screens in Washington, watching missiles arc across the sky and counting interceptors. We do not know how this ends. We do not know how long it lasts. We do not know what the Middle East looks like on the other side. What we do know is that it is our duty to keep you informed, accurately, completely, without fear and without favor. I am Tahila Carter. We will be back with continuing coverage throughout the evening. Stay with us.